Recognizing the MLA from Chilliwack North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the newly appointed critic for childcare and early childhood education, it is my pleasure to speak to this bill. At first glance, this bill appears helpful, allowing more childcare programs on school grounds so parents can find care where their children already learn. But, Mr. Speaker, we must begin by acknowledging the obvious. This government already did this 5 years ago. In 2020, it passed Bill 8, creating sections 85.2 and 85.3 of the School Act to authorize board-operated before and after school care. The legislative groundwork has already been in place. What's still missing? Thanks for the tip. What's still missing is meaningful process. Yesterday, the Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction claimed that our leader's former party cancelled the NDP's $14 a day childcare program back in 2002. Let's set the record straight. In 2001, with the NDP down 43 points in the polls and just 2 months away from losing official party status, the NDP government rushed out the Childcare BC Act promising $7 a day childcare that would rise to $14 by 2004 without a single funded space or centre ready to open. It wasn't another government that cancelled that plan. It was British Columbians who cancelled the NDP. And now, 24 years later, we're hearing the same slogans from the same party, still promising what it hasn't delivered. Fast forward to 2017, the same party made the same mistake. It promised universal $10 a day childcare within 10 years. 8 years later, families are still waiting. Regarding the shift toward before and after school care in 2020, it came 3 years after the NDP had first promised universal childcare for children aged 0 to 5. As the federally funded universal prototype testing concluded and a preliminary report, and I quote, focused on early results and financial implications for future rollouts, was delivered to the ministry in January 2020. The province quietly reverted to its original 2001 model because before and after school care was the most cost-effective option available. Just 3 months later, in March 2020, sections of 85.2 and 85.3 of the School Act were introduced, which are the same provisions that this bill seeks to amend 5 years later. During debate yesterday, the member for Abbotsford West made an important point stating, and I quote, I'm also concerned about the lack of consultation and transparency around this initiative. I was around when the before and after school pilot project was announced, $20 million for 3 school districts, Nechako Lakes, Chilliwack, and Nanaimo Ladysmith. It was framed as a learning opportunity. The province said it would gather data and evaluate how well school-based childcare models functioned before considering expansion. But to date, there has been no report showing what was learned from that pilot project. No data or uptake, unquote. Mr. Speaker, everything the member for Abbotsford West said is true. It underscores a pattern that runs straight through this file. Pilots launched without follow-up, evaluations written but not released, and policy decisions made without the transparency British Columbians deserve. In 2021, when Ottawa adopted BC's model as the basis for its $35 billion Canada-wide early learning and childcare plan,
Thank you very much, members. Chilliwack North, carry on.
Thanks for the applause. This government was eager to take credit. During the June 2nd, 2021 estimates debate, former Minister of State for Childcare, Katrina Chen, said, and I quote, "We're quite confident with the things we've learned we are ready to go with federal dollars." That confidence, Mr. Speaker, didn't last long. Within a year, the government began carrying over almost all of its unspent federal child care funds. In 2021 and 22, 89% of the federal child care funding went unspent. In 22-23, 88%. In 23-24, up to 60%. And for the year ending March 31st, 2025, the province had already requested to carry forward up to 30%. Those are not numbers of a system that was ready to go. They are numbers of a bureaucracy that can't keep pace with its own promises. Not long after that 2021 exchange, British Columbia became the first province in Canada to sign the Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare Agreement with Ottawa, signaling every other jurisdiction to follow suit. That single signing decision effectively convinced the federal government to scale up its commitment to more than $70 billion over 10 years for a system that here in BC was already showing cracks during the prototype phase as early as 2019. 4 years later, during the 2025 estimates debate, member for Abbotsford Mission pressed for clarity on whether those early findings, including the concerns raised in BC's own prototype evaluation, had been shared with Ottawa before the agreement was signed. She asked the current minister directly, and I quote, "Given that the federal government modeled his national childcare plan on BC's $10 a day prototype testing, did the ministry share the contents of the preliminary evaluation report, including the concerns it raised, with the federal government before the agreement was signed?" The minister's response was astonishing. She replied, and I quote, "Really, that is a question for the federal government, not for ourselves, as to how they built out their model," end quote. Mr. Speaker, the answer says it all. When the federal government copied BC's model, this ministry was eager to take credit. But when it came time to answer for what was actually shared as to what Ottawa was told about the weakness of that model,
Carry on, Chilliwack North.
thank you. Suddenly it became a question for the federal government. It was a telling example of how this government avoids direct accountability. Soon after those exchanges, another transparency issue emerged. Beginning in April 2025, the Deputy Minister of Education and Childcare's proactive disclosure calendars, which must be published monthly under the Freedom of Information and Protection and Privacy Act, began appearing completely blank. There are 57 months of calendars available for this Deputy Minister's service across various ministries over the years, but the only 4 that have been wiped clean are the ones since April 2025, the very month when the estimates debates took place. Months later, on October 15th, 2025, Peter John Mitchell of Cardus released a new analysis that helped connect the dots. His report confirmed that the 23-24 annual report released to the public had been changed to blur the line between spaces funded by Ottawa and those created by the market. Instead of listing new funded spaces, the
Chilliwack
province...
North, we are trying to talk about Bill 19, and there is some question as to where we're going here. So if you wouldn't mind bringing it back to 19, that'd be great.
Sure. If you just give me a tiny bit of latitude, I'll demonstrate the connection. I'm good. Okay, began using monthly average spaces, folding in private and non-funded growth to inflate totals. Mitchell found that the previous year's numbers were quietly revised to count all the spaces regardless of the funding sources, and that the province did not disclose that the method had been changed. Mr. Speaker, that is not transparency, that is moving the goalposts. But the story didn't begin
Members,
there.
Chilliwack North has the floor, and I would like to hear what she has to say.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But the story didn't begin there. Before the Cardis analysis ever came out, the government had already delayed the release of the same report for political convenience. Under the
Chilliwack
Canada
North.
BC, yep.
I would like you to get to Bill 19 very quickly.
All right, I'll tell you what. Okay, so it's actually all linked together, Mr. Speaker. The federal funding and the British Columbia funding and the Cardis report actually does link it all together. So I'll just move ahead here. So yesterday, October 21st, the Federal Auditor General released a performance audit of the CWELC, Canada-wide Early Learning and Child Resource System, which is linked to BC. The findings mirrored the very concerns that opposition had raised for months. Of the 250,000 new spaces Ottawa promised, only 112,000 had been created, less than half the target. With most of the shortfall expected in the final 2 years, the Auditor General warned that families across Canada risk being left without the childcare they were promised. On October 1st, 2025, just 6 days after this bill was introduced, this Bill 19, Cabinet quietly appointed a new Assistant Deputy Minister to lead the British Columbia's Childcare Division through Order in Council. The individual chosen to lead the division, Michelle Lattimore, did not come from within British Columbia's public service, but directly from Ottawa's inner circle. She has held some of the senior-most federal roles connected to early learning and intergovernmental coordination, serving as Director General of the Client Experience Branch at Immigration. From that position, she oversaw the federal negotiation and implementation of every Canada-wide agreement and delivered the technical briefing on Bill C-35 to Parliament. The same briefing where it was explained, and I quote, "Funding may also be withheld if a jurisdiction is unable to meet the agreed-upon objectives as set out in the agreement." That same power to withhold funding is written plainly in Section 4.4.7 of the Canada-BC Agreement, which authorizes Canada to withhold amounts payable if British Columbia is unable to meet the objectives of the agreement. Mr. Speaker, that raises an unavoidable question. Did Ottawa threaten to withhold or even hint at withholding its funding unless the Director General of Federal Childcare Secretariat was brought to oversee BC's program? It's a question. And if so, that is not a fundamental breach of jurisdiction.
Chilliwack North, I apologize to interrupt you. Minister of Education.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I do believe we're on Bill 19, and I would please ask if the Speaker would remind the member that we are on Bill 19 and to speak to the bill. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, it's somewhat disturbing that a member cannot finish her speech without constant interruptions from the Minister of Education. This bill deals with childcare. It does. On school grounds, the minister is actually right, but the reason that's happening is because there is a lack of childcare in this province, which the member is actually totally at liberty to address. As uncomfortable as that may make the Minister of Education, a minister responsible for childcare, this bill is actually dealing with some of the shortcomings that this government has had. And it is every right for the member from Chilliwack to be able to speak to that in her allotted time without interruption. So if she's pointing out facts, dealing with childcare, dealing with funding models.
Thank you, members, for your
disturbing?
input this afternoon. Thank you
how is
very
it
much,
disturbing?
members. Thank you, members. Thank you, member. I appreciate your input. I appreciate all of the input this afternoon. I am terribly interested in hearing about Bill 19 this afternoon, and I can appreciate the reach that you're trying to make, member, to the federal government, but I am very interested in hearing specifically about how Bill 19 plays out or might play out in British Columbia. So we'll return back to Chilliwack North, and I would ask members to give the floor to this member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I'm going to say, I'm going to simply conclude by saying that, you know, this is uncomfortable information that I've brought forward today. It's completely appropriate in the fact that this, if I could just finish, thank you.
Members, Chilliwack North has the floor.
This bill is about school boards being able to charge a reasonable amount. That's money. We're talking about money. This ministry has received lots of money. This is a little history in the money that has been received and how it's been dealt with. So I will conclude by simply stating that at committee stage, we will examine all these matters closely, the implications of the amendments to the School Act, the shifting boundaries between provincial and federal responsibilities, the lack of transparency that now defines the government's handling of Childcare BC. These are questions that must be answered, not evaded. We will endeavour to do the work on behalf of the people of the province of British Columbia as Her Majesty's Royal Opposition, and on behalf of parents and families everywhere who deserve transparency, accountability, and a system worthy of their trust. Thank you.